I stared at the birthday cake, 40 unlit candles mocking me as Richard's words hung in the air like poison. I've fallen in love with someone else. 5 words that shattered 2 decades of marriage on what should have been a celebration of my 40th year. My name is Raylin, and this wasn't how I imagined marking this milestone. The cake I'd baked myself sat untouched on our granite countertop, chocolate with buttercream frosting, his favourite. It's a layer, isn't it? My voice was steadier than I felt. The signs had been there. Late nights at the office, secretive phone calls, the way he'd mention his assistant's name with practiced casualness. Richard didn't even have the decency to look ashamed. She understands me, Ray. She sees the world the way I do. He adjusted his tie, the blue silk one I'd given him for Christmas. You've become comfortable, safe. I need more than that. Comfortable? I laughed, but it sounded wrong, hollow. 20 years of marriage and you're throwing it away because I'm comfortable. She's 25, vibrant, ambitious. Get out! The words came automatically, surprising us both. Just get out. He reached for me, but I stepped back, bumping into the kitchen island. Ray, don't be dramatic. We can discuss this like adults. Like adults? My hand found the cake behind me. Before I could think, before I could stop myself, I grabbed it and hurled it at him. It hit his expensive suit with a satisfying thud, chocolate and cream exploding across his chest. Are you insane? He frantically wiped at his jacket, face reddening. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're acting like a child. My best friend Michaela chose that moment to walk in through the back door. She had a key and was supposed to join us for the birthday dinner. Her eyes widened at the scene. Richard covered in cake, me trembling with rage, the kitchen a disaster. What the hell? She demanded, moving instantly to my side. Tell her what you just told me, Richard, I said, my voice cracking. Tell her about Allah. Michaela's gasp was sharp. You didn't. This is private, Richard snapped, still trying to salvage his suit. This doesn't concern you, Michaela. Like hell it doesn't. Michaela's arm went around my shoulders. You choose her 40th birthday to do this? You're an even bigger asshole than I thought. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'll come back tomorrow when you're calmer, Ray. We can discuss the logistics then. Logistics? I echoed. Is that what our marriage has become? Logistics? But he was already heading for the door, leaving chocolate footprints on my perfectly polished hardwood floors. The same floors I'd insisted on when we renovated last year, planning for a future that now seemed like a cruel joke. I'll call you tomorrow, he said, not looking back. After the door closed, I stood frozen, staring at the chocolate mess. It was everywhere, the floors, the cabinets, even spattered on the window. 20 years of memories reduced to cake stains and silence. Honey, Michaela said softly, let's get you cleaned up. I need to clean this first. I moved mechanically toward the paper towels. No, you don't. She caught my arm. What you need is wine. Lots of it. I let her guide me to the living room, past the walls covered in photos I'd need to take down. Photos of vacations, anniversaries, moments I thought were real. She sat me on the couch and disappeared into the kitchen, returning with an open bottle and 2 glasses. I should have seen it coming, I said, accepting a very full glass. The late meetings, the new clothes, the gym membership. Stop that right now. Michaela's tone was firm. This is not your fault. He's having a midlife crisis and taking it out on you. I took a long drink, letting the wine burn away the lump in my throat. My eyes landed on my old easel in the corner, gathering dust. I hadn't touched it in years, not since Richard suggested I focus on being a proper executive's wife instead of dabbling in hobbies. You know what? I stood up, wine sloshing dangerously. I'm going to paint. Michaela raised an eyebrow. Now? Yes, now. I moved to the easel, hands already itching for a brush. He thinks I'm past my prime, comfortable, safe. I'll show him what 40 looks like. I grabbed a blank canvas from the closet, set it up, and reached for my old acrylic paints. My hands were shaking, but for the first time since Richard's announcement, I felt something other than despair. It was small, just a spark, but it was there. Anger, purpose, determination. Well, Michaela said, settling onto the couch with her wine, this should be interesting. I squeezed paint onto my palette, colours bright against the white surface. Oh, it will be. Trust me, it will be. 3 weeks after the cake incident, my living room had transformed into a makeshift art studio. Canvases leaned against every wall, each one darker and more intense than the last. I was in the middle of working on my latest piece when Michaela burst through the door, waving a flyer like a victory flag. "You need to see this," she announced, thrusting the paper at me. "The Davidson Gallery is hosting an emerging artists showcase next month." I wiped my paint-stained hands on my apron. And you're going to submit your work." She gestured at the paintings surrounding us. "These are good, Ray. Really good." "They're therapy paintings," I argued, turning back to my canvas. "They're just angry splashes of colour." "Exactly. They're raw and honest. Look at this one." She pointed to the piece I'd finished yesterday, a woman's silhouette dissolving into a storm of crimson and black. This is exactly what the art world is looking for right now. The doorbell interrupted her pitch. My heart jumped. Richard still hadn't collected his things, and every unexpected visitor made me nervous. But when I opened the door, it was his brother Dan standing there, looking uncomfortable. "Hey, Ray," he said, shifting his weight. "Can we talk?" I let him in, noticing how his eyes widened at the artwork everywhere. "This is different," he said. "If you're here to defend your brother—" "I'm not." He sat on the only chair not covered in art supplies. "Actually, I came to tell you he's an idiot." Michaela snorted. "Finally, someone in that family with sense." "He's throwing away everything for some midlife fantasy," Dan continued. "Mom and Dad are furious. They wanted me to check on you." Something warm bloomed in my chest. Richard's parents had always treated me like a daughter, and knowing they were on my side meant more than I expected. "I'm okay," I said, surprising myself by meaning it. "Better than okay, actually. I'm painting again." "I can see that." Dan stood up, walking around the room to examine each canvas. He stopped at my latest work, a series of broken wedding rings floating in a turbulent sea. "These are incredible, Ray." "Are you selling them?" Michaela jumped in before I could respond. "She will be. There's this gallery showcase." "The Davidson Gallery?" Dan's eyes lit up. "My firm handles their legal work. The owner, Natalia, she's always looking for new talent." "See?" Michaela practically bounced. "It's a sign." I looked at my paintings with fresh eyes. They weren't just therapy anymore. They were stories, emotions made visible. Maybe it was time to share them. "I'll make some calls," Dan offered. "Natalia owes me a favour." Later that evening, after they'd both left, I was cleaning my brushes when my phone rang. Unknown number. "Hello? Is this Ray Lynn?" a warm accented voice asked. "This is Natalia Davidson. Your brother-in-law showed me photos of your work. I'd like you to bring some pieces to my gallery tomorrow." My heart stopped. "Tomorrow? Is that a problem?" No, it's just they're not properly framed, or bring them as they are," she interrupted. "Raw is good. Honest is better. Come at 10. The next morning I loaded my car with 5 canvases, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped one. The Davidson Gallery was housed in a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and soaring windows. Natalia met me at the door, a striking woman in her 50s with silver-streaked hair and sharp eyes. She didn't speak as she examined each piece, her expression unreadable. Finally, she turned to me. "These are about betrayal," she said. It wasn't a question. "Yes, good. Pain makes the best art." She picked up the dissolving woman piece. "This one. Tell me about it." "It's about disappearing," I said, the words coming easily. "About being erased by someone else's choices." She nodded slowly. "And now you're making yourself visible again, yes? Through these?" "I suppose I am." Natalia set the painting down carefully. "The showcase is in 3 weeks. I want 4 new pieces from you, but not just anger this time. Show me the resurrection too." I mean you're in, darling." She smiled for the first time. "Your work speaks to people who've been invisible." Make them see themselves in your art. I drove home in a daze, my mind already swimming with new ideas. As I pulled into my driveway, I saw Richard's car parked out front. He was sitting on the porch steps, waiting. But for the first time since he left, the sight of him didn't make my heart ache. Instead, I felt something else. A surge of creative energy. A need to get to my easel and show the world what happens after the breaking. He stood as I approached, but I walked past him to unlock the door. "I'm busy," I said. "You'll have to come back another time." For once, I didn't wait to hear his response. The gallery buzzed with opening night energy. My 4 new pieces hung prominently in the center wall, their titles stark against pristine white cards. Resurrection, Phoenix Rising, After the Storm, and 40. Each one told a story of transformation, of pain turned to power. "There's already interest in Phoenix Rising." Natalia appeared at my elbow, champagne flute in hand. "A collector from New York called earlier." I smoothed my new black dress, the first piece of clothing I'd bought for myself in years. "Really?" "Don't sound so surprised." She gestured to the growing crowd around my work. "Your pieces speak to people, especially women of a certain age." A familiar voice cut through the crowd. "Well, well, look who's reinventing herself." I turned to find Alea, Richard's assistant-turned-girlfriend, standing there in a dress that probably cost more than all my paintings combined. Her smile was razor-sharp. "Alea," I said, keeping my voice neutral, "I didn't expect to see you here. Richard mentioned you were dabbling in art again." She tilted her head, examining 40. "How therapeutic for you." Before I could respond, Natalia stepped forward. "Ah, you must be the muse," she said, her tone arctic. "The paintings wouldn't exist without you, dear. Your contribution to the art world is noted." Alea's smile faltered. She opened her mouth to reply, but was interrupted by a commotion near the entrance. A group of people had gathered around a tall, striking woman who seemed to command attention effortlessly. "Zella's here," Natalia murmured. "This should be interesting." I'd heard of Zella, a rising star in the art world, known for her bold, controversial pieces. She made her way through the crowd, stopping at each of my paintings. Her expression grew increasingly intense. "Who did these?" she demanded loudly. Natalia nudged me forward. "Raylin, meet Zella. She's our gallery's most successful artist." Zella's eyes narrowed as she looked me up and down. "These are unexpected. The emotion is raw, unschooled but powerful." She turned to Natalia. "Where did you find her?" "She found herself," Natalia replied smoothly. "Sometimes the best art comes from life's surprises." "Indeed." Zella's smile didn't reach her eyes. "We should talk, Raylin. About technique, inspiration, everything." Before I could answer, Dan appeared, placing a protective hand on my shoulder. "Sorry I'm late. Traffic was horrible." He nodded coolly to Alea, who took the hint and melted back into the crowd. "You're just in time," Natalia said. "The art critic from the Tribune just arrived." The next hour passed in a blur of introductions, questions, and barely concealed tensions. Zella hovered nearby, her comments oscillating between compliments and subtle criticisms. Alea disappeared, but not before I overheard her on the phone. "Richard, you need to come see this. She's actually good, like really good." As the evening wound down, a distinguished-looking man approached Phoenix Rising. He studied it intently before turning to Natalia. "I'll take it," he said. "And I want first right of refusal on her next series." Natalia's eyes sparkled. "Excellent choice, Marcus. Raylin, come meet Marcus Bennett. He has one of the largest private collections on the East Coast." Marcus shook my hand firmly. "Your work reminds me of my late wife," he said. "She would have loved these. The strength in them, the defiance. Do you have more pieces in progress?" Yes, I managed. "I'm working on a new series about transformation." "Perfect." He handed me his card. "Keep me informed. And congratulations. You've captured something rare here." After he left, Dan pulled me into a quick hug. "You did it, Ray. And wait until Richard sees the write-up tomorrow." "Write-up?" The critic was taking notes all evening, Natalia said. He seemed particularly moved by 40. Something about the triumphant rebirth of the mature feminine spirit. Zella, who had been listening nearby, stepped closer. We should collaborate sometime, she said, but her tone suggested challenge rather than invitation. I'm doing a show next month. Perhaps we could inspire each other. Thank you, I said carefully, but I think I need to focus on my own voice right now. Her smile tightened. Of course, we all need to find our level. As she walked away, Natalia squeezed my arm. Well handled, and perfect timing. Marcus's purchase just made you our newest breakthrough artist. The real work begins now. I looked around the gallery, at the empty spaces where my paintings had hung before being sold, at the business cards in my hand, at the remnants of my old life transformed into something entirely new. I'm ready, I said, and for the first time in months, I felt truly, completely alive. Dan raised his champagne glass. To new beginnings? No, I corrected, raising my own glass. To phoenixes rising. The crystal clinked. And somewhere in the city, I knew Richard was about to discover that his comfortable, safe ex-wife had found her wings. The Tribune's article changed everything. A stunning debut, they called it. Raw talent emerging from personal tragedy. My phone wouldn't stop ringing, and my email inbox overflowed with inquiries from collectors and galleries. I was in my studio working on a new piece when Michaela burst in waving her tablet. Have you seen Zella's Instagram post? I've been painting all morning, I said, wiping paint from my hands. What now? She thrust the tablet at me. There was Zella, posed dramatically in front of her latest work, a piece that made my stomach drop. The style, the colours, even the theme was eerily similar to my Phoenix Rising. That's not subtle, I muttered, scrolling through the comments. Her followers were praising her innovative new direction. She's copying you. Michaela paced the room. We should call her out. No, I set the tablet down. That's exactly what she wants. Drama sells art too. My phone buzzed. Natalia. Turn on art now, she said without preamble. They're interviewing Zella live. I found the live stream just in time to hear Zella say, Of course, I've been exploring themes of rebirth and feminine power for years. It's fascinating to see newer artists discovering these concepts. Newer artists like Raylin? The interviewer asked. Zella's smile was practiced. Oh, her work shows promise. Very therapeutic. But there's a difference between processing personal drama and creating true art. That by... Michaela started, but my phone buzzed again. This time it was Dan. Are you watching this? He asked. Unfortunately. Good news. Mom and Dad just saw it too. They're officially Team Raylin. Dad's cancelling his firm's contract with Richard. I sat down hard. He doesn't have to do that. Oh, he wants to. Says he won't support someone who throws away gold for glitter. Also, have you checked your email? The Modern Arts Foundation is interested in your work. Before I could respond, there was a knock at my door. Through the window, I saw Zella standing there, looking immaculate in designer clothes. I have to go, I told Dan. The snake just arrived. I opened the door and Zella breezed past me into the studio. Darling, I hope you didn't misunderstand my interview. I was merely providing context for the movement we're both part of. The movement you suddenly joined after seeing my show. I kept my voice level. She examined my latest canvas. Oh, this is interesting. You know, I'm curating a small exhibition next week, very exclusive. I could include one of your pieces. Under my mentorship, of course. That's generous, I said, moving to stand between her and my work. But I'm actually booked for the next 6 months. Natalia's handling my schedule. Natalia? Zella's smile slipped. She's very commercial. You need someone who understands true artistic vision. Like you? Who just happened to discover feminine rebirth themes right after my show? Careful, darling. Her voice hardened. The art world can be very unforgiving to those who make accusations. So can social media, Michaela chimed in, holding up her phone. I've been recording this whole conversation. Would hate for people to see the real you. Zella's face went white. You wouldn't dare. Try me, Michaela said cheerfully. I manage social media campaigns for a living. Want to guess how fast this could go viral? The door burst open again and Natalia strode in, her silver hair flying. Zella, darling, I thought I might find you here. Her smile was predatory. We need to discuss your contract with the gallery, specifically the clause about original work. My work is original? Really? Natalia pulled out her phone, showing side-by-side comparisons of my paintings and Zella's new pieces. Care to explain these similarities to our lawyers? Zella grabbed her bag. You're making a mistake, all of you, she pointed at me. You're nothing but a divorced housewife playing at being an artist. No, I said quietly. I'm an artist who was a housewife, and unlike you, I don't need to steal other people's pain to create something real. After she stormed out, Natalia turned to me with a gleam in her eye. Perfect timing. The Modern Arts Foundation called. They want to feature you in their Women Rising exhibition. It opens the same night as Zella's show. You're kidding. It gets better, she said. They want 10 new pieces and they're prepared to pay significantly more than your current rates. Michaela hugged me. Take that, copycat. I looked at my half-finished canvas, at the colours swirling into something new and powerful. You know what? I think I just found inspiration for the whole series. Oh? Natalia raised an eyebrow. I'm thinking of calling it Original Sin. I picked up my brush. About authenticity, theft, and the price of fake art. Natalia laughed. Now that's what I call turning lemons into lemonade. No, I said, already mixing new colours. That's what I call karma. The Women Rising exhibition opening was a week away when Dan showed up at my studio, looking troubled. You need to see this, he said, handing me his phone. It was an article about Richard's company facing a major fraud investigation. Apparently, Dan continued, someone's been cooking the books for years. The SEC is involved. I set down my paintbrush. Richard? And Alea. She wasn't just his assistant, she was helping him hide financial irregularities. It's all falling apart now. Before I could process this, my phone rang. It was Alea. Of all people. Raylin? Her voice was shaking. I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to talk to you. Curiosity won out. I'm at my studio. She arrived 20 minutes later, looking nothing like the polished homewrecker from the gallery. Her designer clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared. He used me, she said without preamble, dropping onto my paint-splattered couch. All of it. The affair, the promotion, everything. He needed someone to help hide the missing money, and I was stupid enough to fall for his lines. How much? I asked. Millions, she laughed bitterly. He said it was creative accounting, that everyone did it. I believed him because I wanted to believe him, because he made me feel special. Like he made me feel worthless, I said quietly. She looked at my newest paintings, the Original Sin series. These are about betrayal too, aren't they? But different from your first ones. They're about authenticity, about the price of pretending to be something you're not. I get that now. She stood up, straightening her shoulders. I'm turning myself in, making a deal with the investigators. Richard doesn't know yet. Why are you telling me this? Because you deserved better. And because... She hesitated. Because your art helped me see the truth. About him, about myself. It's like looking in a mirror that shows who you really are. After she left, I called Natalia. Did you hear about Richard? Darling, everyone's heard. It's all over the financial news. But forget that. Wait until you hear what Marcus Bennett just offered for your entire Original Sin series. She named a figure that made me sit down. That's impossible. That's the market value of authentic emotion, dear. Speaking of which, guess who's trying to postpone her exhibition opening? Zella? Apparently her new direction isn't resonating with collectors. Something about it feeling derivative. Later that evening, Michaela brought wine and takeout. We were discussing the exhibition when someone pounded on the door. It was Richard, looking dishevelled and desperate. Ray, please. He stumbled in before I could stop him. I need your help. They're going to arrest me. Good, I said, surprised by how calm I felt. You don't understand. I did it for us. The lifestyle we had, the house, everything, it all needed money. No, Richard, you did it for you. I never needed any of that. He grabbed my arm. Please, I still have some accounts they don't know about. We could leave. Start over. Michaela stepped between us. Let go of her, or I start recording for my 10,000 Instagram followers. He released me, looking around wildly. His eyes landed on my paintings. You're doing well now. You could help me. Like you helped me? I pointed to Original Sin Nar 3, a piece showing a man drowning in his own reflection. I already painted your future, Richard. I'm not going to help you escape it. You vindictive bitch, he snarled. You're enjoying this. No, I said truthfully. I'm just finally seeing you clearly. Now, get out before I call Dan and tell him you're trying to flee prosecution. After he left, Michaela hugged me. You okay? I looked at my paintings, at the story they told of truth and lies, of fake gold and real strength. You know what? I really am. My phone buzzed with a text from Natalia. Just heard from the Modern Arts Foundation. They want to tour your work nationally after our exhibition. Ready to go big? I texted back, ready. Michaela read the message over my shoulder and grinned. From housewife to national artist, while Richard goes from CEO to convict. If that's not karma... It's not about karma anymore, I said, picking up my brush. It's about finally being real. I turned to my latest canvas, a woman emerging from a chrysalis of broken mirrors. Each shard reflected a different truth, but the woman's face was peaceful, free. Besides, I added, mixing a new shade of gold, success is the best revenge. To success, then? Michaela raised her wineglass. I looked at my paint-stained hands, at the life I'd created from the ashes of the one Richard destroyed, and smiled. No, to authenticity. Our glasses clinked as outside, sirens wailed in the distance, heading toward Richard's office. The Women Rising exhibition opening was everything I'd dreamed of and nothing I'd expected. My entire Original Sin series dominated the main wall, while spotlights illuminated my earlier works about betrayal and rebirth. The crowd was 3 times what the gallery usually drew, and I couldn't take 2 steps without someone wanting to discuss my work. The New York Times critic is here, Natalia whispered, steering me toward a severe-looking woman in black. And the curator from the Metropolitan Museum of Art. The Met? My throat went dry. You didn't mention. Because you'd have gotten nervous. Now smile and remember, you earned this. Before I could respond, a commotion erupted near the entrance. Zella had arrived wearing what looked like a designer version of my usual painting clothes. Imitation really is the sincerest form of flattery, Michaela muttered beside me. Should we get security? No need, Natalia said smoothly. Watch this. She glided over to Zella, air-kissing both cheeks. Darling, how brave of you to come, especially after having to cancel your own exhibition. Zella's smile was brittle. Postpone, not cancel. I'm exploring new directions. Again? Natalia raised an elegant eyebrow. Do try to pick one and stick with it, dear. Marcus Bennett chose that moment to join us, champagne in hand. Raylin, these new pieces are extraordinary. The progression from pain to authenticity. Remarkable. Thank you, I said, watching Zella's face tighten. It's been quite a journey. Speaking of journeys, Marcus continued, have you seen the news? Your ex-husband made quite a splash on the business pages. Richard took a plea deal. Dan appeared at my elbow. 5 years minimum. Alea got 18 months for cooperation. Zella perked up. How fascinating. Have you considered painting about that? The downfall of... I don't need to, I interrupted. I already captured it here. I gestured to Original Sin Nar 7, a piece showing a man's reflection shattering into dollar bills. Art isn't about revenge. It's about truth. Truth, she scoffed. Truth doesn't sell. Really? Natalia smiled wickedly. Because Raylin's entire series just sold. to the Metropolitan Museum of Art's permanent collection. The colour drained from Zella's face. She opened her mouth, closed it, then turned and stalked toward the exit, nearly colliding with Richard's parents who were just arriving. Darling girl, Richard's mother enveloped me in a hug. These are magnificent. You've always had this in you. We're so proud, his father added, and relieved we saw the real you before. Well, he gestured vaguely toward a newspaper someone had left on a nearby bench, Richard's mugshot visible on the front page. The New York Times critic approached, notebook in hand. Ms. Raylin, I'd love to discuss your exploration of authenticity versus artifice. The way you've captured the moment of revelation in Original Sin Famper 4 is particularly striking. As I answered her questions, I caught glimpses of my reflection in the gallery windows. A year ago, I was a wife trying to be perfect. Now, with paint under my nails and confidence in my stance, I was finally myself. One last question, the critic said. Your ex-husband's arrest coinciding with your artistic success. Some might call that poetic justice. Your thoughts? It's not about justice, I replied. It's about becoming real. Sometimes we need to shatter completely to find our true reflection. She smiled, writing quickly. That's beautiful. Would you say? A crash interrupted her. Near the entrance, Zella had returned, clearly drunk, and knocked over a sculpture. It's not fair, she shouted. I worked for years, and she just walks in and creates authentic art, Natalia cut in sharply. Security, please escort Ms. Zella out. And dear, she smiled coldly, consider your contract with us terminated. As security led her away, Michaela squeezed my arm. Now that's karma. No, I said, watching Zella's exit. That's the price of pretending. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of interviews, congratulations, and sales. By closing time, every piece had sold, and 3 major galleries were competing to host my next show. To authenticity, Natalia raised her glass in a final toast. And to the artist who reminded us all what that looks like. I looked around at my work, at the faces of people still discussing each piece, at the empty spaces where Zella had tried to copy my journey and failed. You know what the best part is, Michaela said softly. You did this by being yourself. Not Richard's wife, not Zella's competition. Just you. Just me, I echoed. And for the first time in my life, that felt like more than enough. It felt like everything. The prison visiting room was colder than I expected. I sat at the metal table watching Richard approach in his orange jumpsuit, thinner and greyer than I remembered. This wasn't how I'd planned to spend the morning before my Metropolitan Museum opening, but when he'd called, something in his voice made me come. You look good, he said, sitting down. I saw your picture in Art News. Why am I here, Richard? He rubbed his face, the handcuffs clinking. I've had a lot of time to think. About us. About everything I threw away. If this is an attempt at reconciliation, no. He smiled sadly. I saw your paintings, Ray. The ones about me. About us. You finally showed me who I really am. And, he gestured to his surroundings, here I am. Art reflects truth, I said. Sometimes ugly truth. Like how I destroyed 20 years of marriage for a lie. Alea wasn't even interested in me. She just wanted access to the accounts. And I just wanted you to love me for who I was. He leaned forward. I did love you. I just forgot how to see you. Then you started painting again, and suddenly everyone could see what I'd missed. You were never invisible, Ray. I was just blind. Why tell me this now? Because I'm being transferred next week. Maximum security. His hands trembled. And because I saw your latest piece in the gallery preview. Forgiveness. The one with the broken chains turning into butterflies. I stayed silent, remembering the painting. It had poured out of me one night, unexpected and powerful. Is it? He hesitated. Is it about me? No, I said gently. It's about me. About forgiving myself for believing I wasn't enough. A guard approached. "Time's up." Richard stood quickly. "I know it's too late, but I'm sorry, Ray. Not just for the affair or the fraud, but for trying to make you smaller so I could feel bigger." "I know," I said, standing too. "That's why I could paint forgiveness." As I turned to leave, he called out, "Will you save me a catalogue from the Met show?" I looked back. "I'll have Dan bring you one." Outside, Michaela waited in her car. "You okay?" "Better than okay." I checked my phone. 3 missed calls from Natalia. "Ready for tonight?" "The real question is the Met ready for you? They're expecting over 1,000 people." The museum was already buzzing when we arrived for the final preparations. My work filled the modern wing, each piece telling part of my journey from invisible wife to visible artist. "The Today Show wants an interview," Natalia announced, appearing with her clipboard. "And there's a Hollywood producer interested in your story." "My story isn't finished," I said, adjusting the lighting on forgiveness. "No," a familiar voice agreed, "but it's inspiring a lot of other stories." I turned to find Alea looking different in her prison release program uniform. She held out a small canvas. "I started painting, in therapy. It's helping me understand everything." The painting was rough but honest, a woman trapped in a golden cage of her own making. "Keep going," I told her. "Truth is hard, but it sets you free." "Like you're free now?" She gestured to the exhibition. "You've become everything he said you couldn't be." "No," I corrected. "I became who I always was. I just needed to break free to see it." The opening hours flew by. Critics praised the raw, emotional honesty of my work. Collectors competed for my next series. Women approached me with tears in their eyes, sharing their own stories of becoming visible. Near midnight, as the crowd thinned, Dan found me by forgiveness. "He cried," he said simply, "when I told him about your success. Real tears." "Good," I replied. "Not because I want him to suffer, but because it means he can still feel." "Mom and Dad want to know if you'll still come to Sunday dinners." "Of course, they're family, the real kind." Natalia joined us, champagne in hand. "Darling, we need to discuss your next exhibition. Paris is calling." "Paris?" Michaela squealed. "Girl, you've gone international." I looked around at my work, at the story it told of breaking and healing, of invisibility and emergence, at the women still clustering around certain pieces, taking photos, wiping tears, holding hands. "You know what?" I said. "I think I'm ready for Paris, but first I need to paint something new." "About?" Natalia asked. I touched the surface of forgiveness, feeling its texture under my fingers. "About what happens after forgiveness, about choosing your own light." "Perfect," she smiled. "That's exactly what they want in Paris. Hope." "Not just hope," I corrected. "Truth. Because sometimes the truth is, we have to lose everything to become who we really are." Michaela raised her glass. "To becoming." "No," I said, smiling. "To being. Finally, completely being." The crystal clinked as somewhere, in a prison cell, a man looked at his ex-wife's painting and finally saw her true colours. The Paris gallery buzzed with anticipation as I put the finishing touches on the arrangement. My new series, Being, filled the space with colour and light. Each piece captured a moment of pure authenticity. Women finding their power, their voice, their truth. "They're already lining up outside," Natalia said, checking her watch. "The French art critics are calling you l'artiste de la Renaissance féminine, the artist of feminine rebirth." "Speaking of rebirth," Michaela chimed in, "guess who just got released early for good behaviour?" "Alea?" "She's teaching art therapy to domestic violence survivors now." Michaela showed me her phone. "Look at her students' work. The paintings were raw, powerful, healing, just like mine had been in the beginning." "Good for her," I said, meaning it. "Ms. Raylin?" A young gallery assistant approached. "There's someone here to see you. Says she's an old competitor?" Zella stood in the doorway, different from the last time I'd seen her. Humbler. Her designer clothes replaced by simple artist's wear, paint staining her fingers. "I saw your show in New York," she said quietly. "It made me realize something. I'd spent so long copying others, I'd forgotten my own voice. And now, She pulled out her phone, showing me her latest work. Gone were the imitations and forced themes. These pieces were personal, vulnerable, real. I started painting my truth, she said, about growing up in my mother's shadow, always trying to be what everyone expected. It's not selling like your work, but it's honest, I finished. Yes, she met my eyes. I owe you an apology and a thank you. Before I could respond, Dan burst in. Ray, you need to see this. He held up a tablet showing a prison art therapy program. There was Richard teaching other inmates to paint. His students' works lined the walls, simple, honest pieces about regret, hope, and redemption. He's different, Dan said. Really different. The therapy program director says he's their best teacher. Because he finally learned to see, I said, studying the images. Himself and others. The gallery doors opened and people flooded in. Critics, collectors, art lovers, but mostly women. They moved from piece to piece, some crying, some laughing, all connecting. Excuse me, a quiet voice said. A teenage girl stood before me clutching a sketchbook. Your work? It helped me tell my parents the truth about who I am. Can you sign this? As I signed, more people gathered, sharing their stories. A woman who left an abusive marriage. Another who started her own business at 50. Each one found their reflection in my paintings. Natalia appeared with a champagne bottle. Time for the announcement, I nodded, and she clinked a glass for attention. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, we're not just here to celebrate art. Raylin is opening her own gallery back home, not just for established artists, but for those finding their voice. A place where truth can speak through colour. The crowd applauded, but I noticed Zella slip toward the exit. Zella, I called out, submit your new work when we open. The real stuff, not the copies. She turned, eyes bright. Really? Truth deserves a wall of its own. Later, as the evening wound down, Michaela hugged me. Remember when you threw that birthday cake at Richard? Who knew that would lead to this? I looked around at my work, at the women still discussing each piece, at Zella talking earnestly with a young artist, at the photos of Richard's prison art program. It was never about the betrayal, I realized. It was about becoming real. All of us. Even Richard. Especially Richard. I touched the surface of my latest painting, a phoenix not rising from ashes, but soaring through clear skies. Sometimes we need to break others to realize we're broken ourselves. And sometimes, Natalia added, joining us, we need to forgive ourselves before we can create something true. My phone buzzed. A message from Richard. Your work saved me, not from prison, but from myself. Thank you. I showed Michaela the text. Think people can really change? I think people can become real, she said. You taught us that? Outside, the Paris lights sparkled like inspiration made visible. Inside, my paintings glowed with truth. Not just mine anymore, but everyone's who found themselves in the colours. Ready to head back and start the new gallery? Natalia asked. I looked at my paint-stained hands, at the women finding their stories in my art, at the future unfolding like a blank canvas. Yes, I said. It's time to help others find their colours. Because sometimes the greatest art isn't what hangs on walls, but what happens when we finally let ourselves be seen. Really seen. In all our beautiful, broken, authentic glory.